Hello and welcome. This is the Defense Cafe, the Liberal Security and Defense podcast brought to you by the Friedrich Naumann Foundation in Brussels. I'm Sebastian, I'm your host, and today, in episode number 1, we will be speaking with Renaldas Vaisbrodas in Lithuania. We will be discussing the special security situation of Lithuania, its contribution to European defense, its relationship with both NATO and EU, and, last but not least, we will be talking about firing guns. So I'm here with Renaldas Vaisbrodas. Hi, Renaldas.
Hello, Sebastian.
Very nice that you're joining us today. We're actually 2,000 kilometers apart. Renaldas is in Vilnius, whereas I am in Hamburg, but that's the way it is in times of Corona. Renaldas is a Lithuanian political professional, and he is a founding member of Laisvės Party, a liberal party in Lithuania. Previously, he has been an advisor to Lithuanian President Grybauskaitė and to the former liberal leader in the European Parliament, Guy Verhofstadt. Renaldas, maybe you tell us a bit more how you actually became active in politics and where your interest in defense comes from.
Thanks, Sebastian, for having me. And indeed, I think the opportunity of having this conversation, being far away and making use of modern technologies in this way is something that will stay with us further after the corona. So let's enjoy it. As for my engagement in politics, I have been privileged enough to be born still in the Soviet times, and I matured as a person already in independent Lithuania. So somehow I was part also, and personally I witnessed transformation and had the chance to be part of that transformation when in my teens I joined the newly established political youth organizations. That's where I started my path. And of course, coming out of the communism and the Soviet Union, the ideas of freedom and democracy and liberalism in the broadest sense of the word were the most attractive to the young people. So we found many youngsters that wanted to be part of this change, that wanted to be able to contribute, and that's how it came about for me. I joined Lithuanian Liberal Youth. I was active in other non-governmental organizations. I ended up representing non-governmental organizations in Brussels. I was at some point elected to the European Youth Forum, which is the platform of youth organizations in Europe. I had the privilege to serve as a president of that organization, first Eastern European to have that job, and later on stayed on in Brussels and worked for probably one of the most impressive Europeans, still active politicians in Brussels, Guy Verhofstadt. From there on, returned back to Lithuania and worked for not least impressive lady politician in Europe and the world, I believe, Dalia Grybauskaitė. So I have been privileged to experience politics from up close, but also from the grassroots, seeing it from the perspective of the very local level to the perspective of European level. So I have been privileged to have all these experiences in my fold.
Wow, yeah, that's quite an impressive career, and I think it's very interesting that you belong to the few people that have worked as well in the Brussels political bubble, the one where I still work at, and a national capital's political sphere, which in your case is Vilnius. And as we've just found out before our conversation here, you have never actually fired a gun, right?
In fairness, I must admit that I did, but I'm not a big fan of that, I must say. And we have a kind of a standing joke about that with one of the leaders of the Laisvės Party, Mayor of Vilnius, Remigijus, whereas he is a member of the Riflemen Union in Lithuania, and he is kind of very outspoken on the gun laws here in Lithuania, that he would like them to be liberal so that people can defend themselves in case they're need. And I am constantly in our party the one asking the question, do we really? Should we? Why? So we constantly have this. It's not that I don't see the point for guns and for the hard defense. On the contrary, I respect greatly our soldiers, our servicemen and women, and their contribution that they are making for the defense. But I suppose this is not for everybody, and I admit that it's certainly not for me.
Well, I agree. I guess it's a sympathetic feature that you don't enjoy firing guns. I can absolutely agree. Having been in the military for 12 years, I had to shoot guns regularly, and I didn't belong to the guys really loving it either. I somehow looked at it as like playing billiards. It's very similar, actually, because you also have to hold your breath the moment you're shooting. But definitely, I don't think that having shot a gun is a necessary qualification to be competent in defense. You have mentioned Lithuanian Riflemen, a very interesting organization. We will talk about that later in this conversation, because I think it's a very specific Baltic thing. But let's come to Lithuania, and maybe you can explain to our listeners a bit what is actually the threat that Lithuania is most concerned of. What is the scenario that you are concerned of when it comes to the security of Lithuania?
Well, look, I think for this exercise to be successful, our listeners are warmly invited to have a look at the map of Europe and take a look of where Lithuania is. A fun fact is that Lithuania is probably the only country in the world that borders Russian Federation on the west. And when you look into the map, you can see that Lithuania is squashed between Kaliningrad region that belongs to the Russian Federation on the Baltic coast on one hand, and Belarus on the east, while we are bordering also the EU member states of Poland and Latvia on the north and Poland in the south. The story is that if you look at the geography of where we are, you see that Lithuania is connected to the European Union, if you like, or the alliance, NATO alliance, only by this short stretch of land that connects Poland and Lithuania. It's not very large. It is in the area of 60-80 kilometers. That's the stretch that we've got. And that's the only stretch we have. So if you look at it from the strategic perspective, and you look also from the political perspective, you will understand where our security problems or perceptions of and worries come about. So first of all, this vital corridor is the corridor that connects us, but it also is the corridor that can disconnect us. So it holds strategic importance not only for Lithuania, but it actually holds strategic importance for all three Baltic states. NATO and the European Union, and certainly national security strategy of my own country, have recognized Russia as the biggest threat for national security, conventional as well as non-conventional threats, in the sense that we, having seen numerous examples of Russian disregard for international law and activities that have been performed against its neighbors, like war in Ukraine, occupation of sovereign territory of Georgia, like continuous engagement in the conflict in Transnistria. So all of these do not inspire us with trust that the Russian regime that is on top of all this is not democratic, can be expected to hold up to the agreements, or that it would respect international law and its requisites. So in that sense, we are faced with a situation where we have to understand that we have to rely on our alertness, on our awareness. We have to work to promote our deterrence, and we have to be a reliable ally for NATO, the European Union, but also to contribute to our own security and offer it to the others. So I think these are the realistic mottos of national defense system in Lithuania.
So this corridor you were speaking about, I think that's the Suwalki Gap, right?
Indeed, that's what it is named. It is a Suwalki Gap, and that gap is something that we hope never closes.
If our listeners follow your advice, and if they look at a European map, they will find that east of Lithuania there's still Belarus before there's Russia. So I can understand that in all those strategic considerations, Belarus is basically considered a part of Russia, more or less. But what is actually the role that you see for Belarus in this scenario? Is it the role of a victim or of a partner of Russia, an ally? Why doesn't Belarus play any part in this strategic game?
I think Belarus plays a part, but it's secondary, if not tertiary, in Russian military strategic calculations. First of all, this relates to the status quo. It's a simple reality that Russian troops are in Belarus. They can go as they please and use infrastructure existing in Belarus. We see that the armies of Belarus and Russian Federation are interoperable, and they are training together, they are exercising together, and the idea that in a scenario of conflict, God forbid, the two countries would choose different paths of engagement, military engagement for that matter, is preposterous, and I think simply it won't happen. So realistically speaking, Belarus is an independent actor with its own army and military, but it is fully integrated into the Russian strategic thinking, and it is believed that any operations, defense or offense, would have to be organized together between Russian and Belarusian, or consequently we would have to engage Russian and Belarusian troops alike if such aggression were to follow in the direction of Lithuania or the allies.
I see. I visited you in January in Vilnius. You were so kind to show me a bit around the beautiful city. And something that struck me was that we saw plenty of NATO flags. We even drove around a NATO roundabout. There were like NATO anniversary celebration decorations around your Ministry of Defense, because NATO just turned 70. So NATO was very, very visible in the city. So it's clear to me that, well, NATO is very popular in Lithuania, very different to most Western European countries. But what is the level of trust that Lithuania has in the European Union when it comes to security and defense?
Well, it depends how do you extrapolate it. So, I mean, if you look at the general trust or attitude towards the European Union, then Lithuanians are extremely Europhile. They love the EU. They think it's doing great and doing a lot of good for our country in particular, but also in general for the continent. So I think we are very Europhile. Now, when it comes to security issues, I think there's an overall skepticism towards the European Union as a player, and that skepticism, I think it has two elements to it. One of them is the overwhelming trust that Lithuania places on North Atlantic Treaty. The idea or dream, if you like, of the membership in the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, was at the beginning of the restoration of independence process as something that is distant and hardly attainable. And here we are, 30 years later, we are a full-blown member of NATO, participating extensively in its different formats, and we are very proud and very happy of that. So the fact that NATO includes also our transatlantic partners like United States and Canada has been a great reassurance for the Lithuanian public. And that's where I come to the second reason why the EU is less trusted than the NATO. And the reason is, well, it's again linked to our past. At the time of the Soviet occupation, the United States maintained the posture of non-recognition and continuous engagement with Lithuanian authorities in exile. There were a number of efforts to maintain the Lithuanian statehood symbols, and that support has always inspired and always left a mark in Lithuania. While it was felt that Western European countries have actually accepted the facts of the occupation, that did not do anything about that occupation, and did not support sufficiently, if you like, the occupied people of the Baltic states in general and Lithuania in particular. So to which extent these are justified or not, I of course leave it to every listener to make these conclusions, but the fact of the matter is that this is a contributing factor to the role that EU is perceived to be playing in security issues and how Lithuanians approach the European Union and its role in security issues.
Mm-hmm. I have just checked on Wikipedia something, because there is a thing which came into being after the Russian annexation of Crimea in 2016. There was the enhanced forward presence of NATO, which means that there's roughly 1,000 NATO soldiers being based in Poland, Latvia, Estonia, and Lithuania to strengthen the eastern flank. And I've had a look at the countries of origin of the troops that are now stationed in Lithuania, or that have been stationed in Lithuania over the last 5 years. And those soldiers came from Germany, from the Netherlands, from the Czech Republic, from France. So obviously all those soldiers are in Lithuania with a NATO flag on their sleeves, but still all these soldiers are EU member state soldiers. So do you think that this clear engagement of EU members in Lithuania has maybe improved the perception of the EU as a defense player a bit?
To be perfectly honest with you, Sebastian, I think there's a very clear distinction drawn that this is NATO. And yes, the leading nations in the enhanced forward presence project and actually troops on the ground, they are European in Lithuania in particular. And I think if listeners from these nations connect to this podcast, I'd like to also say thank you for the support, because it is something that is has provided enormous level of satisfaction and security for many in my country. So I think there is a very clear distinction between NATO and the EU there, and these troops are considered to be NATO troops, even though they are European. I think EU would need something more visual as defining or communicative elements of where Europeans taking care of European security. But in Lithuania, even if that were to happen, it would still require a strong correlation with NATO, that it's not seen as something separate or, God forbid, in competition to NATO. Because this, so far at least in the public debate and the public domain, NATO always comes first when it comes to security.
Clearly, as I've witnessed in Vilnius, this is very interesting. We sometimes, it seems like we always think that the Baltic states are just consumers of security because we are so benevolent in Germany, France, United States. But is that actually true, or is there something that we can learn from Lithuania and its neighbors, something that we can benefit from as well in terms of security and defense?
I think we have been exploring that ourselves as well. At some point, the realization came through that Lithuania cannot only be consumer of security. It has to be able to contribute and offer support to the allies. And I think we have found a particular niche which helps us tremendously. I think Lithuania official Lithuania was one of the first to ever start speaking about propaganda and the use of disinformation as a tool of political and also military warfare. And this was done before it was in fashion, because it seems to me that now it is very much a fashionable thing. But I remember the year 2013, year 2014, just before the occupation of annexation of Crimea and then later occupation of the eastern regions in Ukraine. This was something that was seen kind of with a bit of a skepticism in the European capitals as something that is not an issue for discussion at any relevant high level. It's something for experts, it's something niche topic. And what we have seen since then is a major transformation of the understanding of the importance of the fight against propaganda and disinformation. That is certainly, the game was stepped up, and I'm very happy that the European Union is also is the one that has done incredible progress in this regard. A unit was established in External Action Service. If I remember the genesis of that creation, Lithuania was one of those that was heavily lobbying for this to happen, and it was a success. We've got this unit that actually works, and it delivers, and it provides a good advice on what are the information warfare attacks against the EU member states going on, what sort of fake news are being spread, and why. I think Lithuania has also, through the years, developed expertise of how to engage with civil society and business in fighting Russian trolls, because majority of misinformation arriving at the EU doorsteps is coming from Russian troll factories. We have set up a concept of elves that are fighting trolls and fighting back successfully. So one of the initiatives that you and I, Sebastian, had the chance to meet in Vilnius was an initiative called debunk.eu. This private initiative, cooperation between media organizations, civil society, and the government, allows for different models of pursuing wrongful media appearances, tracking its origins and tracking its spread, and immediately responding to those by sharing that this news has arrived, that this is something that is consciously done to disinform the population. And it has been very successful, and this initiative has been recognized widely, and I understand that the demand for this is continuously growing even in the face of this crisis we are facing now, the COVID-19. When the blame game goes around and comes around, it also involves plenty of disinformation about why, what, when, where, etc., etc., etc. And at the times of uncertainty, the reliable information is worth gold, but unreliable information, there's plenty as well.
Clearly, I can see that also the defense of the Suwałki Gap, even this physical task requires civil society efforts in the field you've just mentioned, in the field of countering disinformation. And I found the example you just stated, the debunk.eu initiative, very impressive. Most importantly, because I didn't know about it. I knew that Estonia was very innovative when it came to cyber defense, but I didn't know that Lithuania was so innovative and helpful when it came to fighting disinformation. So definitely something that we should promote here in this podcast. Maybe we should cover one final thing about Lithuania, because we've mentioned it in the beginning of this podcast. You've mentioned it, the National Riflemen Union. To be honest, this sounds terrible. This sounds like the NRA in the USA. Is that actually a club of people who enjoy shooting guns? Or what is it?
Look, I think I wonder where to start, but okay, I will start from the scratch. I mean, our constitution says very clearly that defense of our country is everyone's responsibility. In effect, for people like me, I'm hitting 40 soon enough. I have grew up in already independent Lithuania, but I was born in the Soviet Union. I did not serve in the armed forces in my country because at the time this was not compulsory. I chose to study at the time. For us, realizing the threat that our nation is facing and looking at the events in Ukraine has drawn attention to the fact that it's our responsibility as well to contribute to the defense of our country. And the big question on everyone's lips is actually how. And because we don't necessarily have experience or knowledge related to security or strategy for defending our country. Moreover, many civilians, if they were to engage in defense activities, they often could end up doing more harm than good. So one has to know what to do and what tasks to take on. And I think this overwhelming feeling of, okay, we will not be helpless, but we want to be useful, has driven many to join this organization that has strong historic roots in Lithuania, pulled people together, civilians that wanted to contribute but did not know how, and offered for them a learning curve of how to engage, where to engage, what to do. And I think this is what it is today as well. The organization nowadays is counting, if I'm not mistaken, around 10,000 people, and the amount of people involved is growing. They take extremely different roles. I mean, some want to engage exclusively on issues related to disinformation that we already spoke about. So there is a unit created for that purpose in Riflemen Union, where people are trained on the latest methods of tracking the cyber threats, understanding it, and counteracting it. Others would like to be more engaged in, demining activities, okay? So the explanation is given to people of how that functions, how it works, how it is integrated in the military, in the structures, who does what. And this is a learning experience that you can be part of and you can contribute to. So I think this drives many to join that is to be part of it, to be part of defense of this country, so that we can take responsibility for our own future.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. And I think it's also worth mentioning that I believe there are similar organizations in Latvia and Estonia, if I'm not mistaken. So probably the better comparison would, instead of the NRA in the United States, would rather be the reserve organizations of the militaries in other European countries. A very interesting organization in any case. Great. So let's end this conversation with a creative question, because one of the major topics here is always European defense cooperation, but European defense integration or cooperation is such a complex and vague thing. It is clear that we are advancing, but it's never really easy to describe. So let me try to make it a bit more tangible. If the European Defense Union, as you would like it to be, was an animal, what animal would it be, Renaldas?
Animals. Today we are going for animals, Sebastian. Good.
We're always going for animals.
Okay. I want to say maybe hamster. And the reason for that, I personally connect a hamster to someone or to animal that has features that is resourceful and quick to react, able to I think resourceful and quick to react it would be the two main features that I would connect to this particular animal. And it also has teeth, and if necessary it can get dangerous if annoyed.
I find this a beautiful proposal and image, and I believe this is also the best idea ever to convince our British friends to return at some point, because they don't love anything more than understatement. And I think this is a third quality of the hamster: resourceful, quick, and in military terms, definitely an understatement. Beautiful.
Yeah, probably.
Thank you so much, Renaldas, for this
Thank you, Sebastian.
Conversation. Thanks for joining the podcast. And you will be able to listen to some of your successors on this program, and we will see what kind of animals they come up with. Thank you, Renaldas.
Super. Thank you, Sebastian.
This was episode number 1 of the Defense Cafe, and in a way it was a terrible start, because it was only men debating about defense. So we will try to do better in episode number 2. We will turn our attention from the eastern border of the European Union and NATO to one of the key member states when it comes to all European defense considerations, and that is France. We will be speaking to Eve Röhrig. She's a defense policy advisor in the French National Assembly. She works for En Marche, the party of Emmanuel Macron, and I look forward to be joined by my future co-host, Theresa Reiter. So stay tuned.